Welcome back to Inside the Mind. This episode is with Ben St. Lawrence, previous Australian 10,000 metre record holder, 2:14 marathoner. Talk about his quick 5Kers in this chat as well. This guy's done it all and somebody in the sport that I look up to massively. I just think he's so grounded, so wise. I got asked, I did this little interview thing a couple of weeks ago and I had to list 5 people I look up to in sport in Australia. Didn't have to be runners, but Ben St. Lawrence was definitely one of the 5. I just feel like he's just an amazing role model in Australian distance running. And every time I see him, he just seems to be so calm and, I don't know, just complete as an individual. He's a dad now as well, so the first time we've got a dad on the show. He'd just come off Sydney Marathon maybe 2 months ago as well, so we talk about his result there, which if you are not aware, he ran 3 hours and 9 minutes. Which is a long way off his 2:14 PB, but we talk about his kind of mentality and what happened in that race and, how hard it was for him to get to the finish line that day. A massive thanks to all the people who have sent in requests of people to interview. Kind of addressed it in the weekly show that it's very, very difficult to have these conversations with people that I don't have a relationship with or have never spoken to before. So I have got, all the 8 people I've got locked in are pretty much all people that you know and have had on the show before and we've had interactions with, because I do feel like some of the questions and some of the directions of the conversation could be pretty heavy and it's hard to do that off the cuff with someone that you don't already have a relationship with. We've got another 3 episodes, I think, coming out this week, so strap yourself in for those ones. Weekly show comes out Wednesday as well, but sit back, relax, enjoy a bit of story time with Ben St. Lawrence and enjoy this 3rd episode of Inside the Mind. Thanks for tuning in. Also remember the Movember movement, if you've got the means to be able to donate towards that. More Than a Run, thanks to Lululemon, also coming up. I'll put those links in the show notes as well. And massive thanks for downloading the show. See yous. Welcome to Inside the Mind. This is going to be our 3rd episode. Ben St. Lawrence, who's someone who's been very generous with their time over the last 6 years of the Inside Running podcast being in the works. Benny, thanks for giving us some time.
No worries, Brady. Thanks for having me on, mate.
Ben, last time I saw you, we were both checking out of the same lobby at the Sydney Marathon, and I checked out a bit before you, and then the receptionist, what is that what they're called, at the front of the hotel lobby when you check out? I think it's a receptionist. Yep. She asked you how your marathon went, and you told her that you'd ran 3:09, and then she congratulated you, and I was sitting there as a bit of a fly on the wall thinking, oh, this is going to be very interesting how he responds as someone who was still is a 27-minute 10K guy, previous Australian record holder, who'd had obviously a disappointing result at Sydney, but did get himself to the finish line. And I was very impressed with how you gave her the time and you kind of spoke. You didn't go into massive detail about who you were or anything like that, but your positivity definitely shone through when talking to someone who didn't quite know who they were talking to.
Yeah, I don't actually remember that interaction, but that's funny. It's always hard when you've had what you would consider an absolute shocker, but what someone with limited running knowledge, or even someone who runs a lot, who 3:09 might have been a huge PB for someone. So it's always difficult to answer that question. And look, to be honest, at that point I was probably just relieved that it was over, and so it was probably easy to be positive about it at the time. And checking out, I was checking out to go and see my wife and baby daughter, and so the race was already behind me, so it's easy to sort of put it behind you and move on to some positive things to think about.
Yeah, I was just blown away by your positivity. I'm just like, you could have been down in the dumps massively, but you seem to handle it really well. And is that something, have you been someone who's moved on from disappointing results quick over the years?
Yes and no. I think bubbling underneath that positivity was still a bit of, quite a bit of disappointment and a bit of not being 100% sure what had gone wrong at that point. But I think one thing I've always been good at is controlling the controllables and not worrying too much about the things that are outside of my control. And so I guess at that point the race was done and dusted, and there was no point being miserable about it. I knew that over the coming weeks I was going to delve a bit deeper into what went wrong and, try to come up with some action items or things that I could actually control coming out of it. But, yeah, at that point, I'd had a bunch of my athletes that I coached run really well that day. And like I said, I was going to see my wife and daughter and, the event itself was a huge success and I got to stay at a nice hotel. And so, yeah, there were lots of positives around that. And I think maybe, compartmentalising is something that I'm quite good at. So, yeah, my race result was shit, but that was only one part of what was happening that day and that weekend and that week. So I was just sort of putting some positive energy towards, other areas of my life at that point, I guess.
And like a month and a bit on now, it was sickness, Benny? Was that what happened? Like you were sick lead into it?
Yeah, no, I was healthy, like leading the week of, and then that day started getting a funny stomach ache. I was out coaching at the GPS Carnival out at Homebush and a weird sort of stomach ache in one part of my abdomen and thought, no, it'll be fine. But it got progressively worse that afternoon, and then into the evening I had some fever and like chills and didn't really sleep. I was waking up sweating and without going into too much detail, possibly was a gallbladder attack or something like that, and definitely shouldn't have lined up. But being the eternal optimist and quite stubborn, I just thought, well, I'll get up and prepare as if I'm going to race. And then once I was up, it's like, I'll just go to the start line and then make a decision. And then it was, I'll just get through the warm-up and then decide. And, if I'd had a coach with me or if my wife Katie would be staying with me, she would have talked me out of racing. But because I was there on my own, I was like, no, I'll be right. And, got a few K in and the pain was, almost unbearable. So pulled the pin at 12K. Anyone who follows me on social media would have seen my post. I stopped at 12K, took my bib off and started to walk through Barangaroo. I was going to head back to the hotel and I got maybe 2 minutes up this set of stairs and I just thought, I can't not finish this. I've always tried to finish things I start, and so I'd pin my bib back on as I walked down the stairs and then joined back in and just made it a mission to try to get to the finish. And so it was rough. It was probably one of the hardest physical things I've ever had to do, get to the finish line, but I'm proud that I did, and I've had a lot of positive feedback from people saying that they respected the fact that I, had an absolute shocker but still just got to the finish line, and I'm glad I did.
What about mentally? Like, you say it was hard physically to get through that last, 30K, but, once you'd made the decision, were you then, content and you're kind of going easy on yourself, or were you then in a state of, negativity for a lot of that last 30K?
No, look, I think because, if it had been me taking the soft option and pulling the pin because I wasn't having a great day or something like that, I would have been angry at myself. But I just physically could not have continued or could not have gone any faster. So at that point, it was my mindset shifted from let's go and run a fast marathon, try and finish on the podium in the Australian Championships, to let's just this is survival. Let's see how tough you are. Let's get through this. And so I was able to sort of put the mental energy into that. I think there was a bit of embarrassment, running past people who kind of looking at me funny, thinking, what's going on here? Why is he having such a shocker? And then other people saying, you're looking great, Benny, great work. And you kind of just and to be honest, there were a few points during the race where I was impressed with how constant the crowd support was. But of any race where I wish there were periods without any crowd, that was probably one of them. I just wanted to kind of get through it without anyone seeing. But yeah, look, it was a very different marathon experience, but it was, still some positives to take out of it. And I knew something physically was wrong, so I didn't feel any guilt in that I was taking the soft option or anything like that.
How's the body now? I know we're trying to, your name's been popping up about, potentially qualify for the Olympics again and look at some ranking points and things like that. Where's your running at as we're sitting here middle of November?
Yeah, so following that, what happened that weekend, I did a lot of tests, worked with GP and some specialists to try to get to the bottom of it, and they think it was probably a gallbladder attack, but I had all the stomach ultrasounds and there's no stones in there or anything, so physically I was fine a week later. So I've got back into training, and I've found out in the last week or so, 2 weeks ago maybe, that I got to start at Osaka Marathon. So that'll be
Okay.
a goal to work towards at the end of Feb next year. I just want to try to run a PB. So my PB is 2:14. I would love to get under that. I'm 42 now. Age, as you say, age can't be an excuse when we've got people like Lisa and Sinead smashing it into their mid-40s, and they are, an absolute inspiration for someone else who's approaching their mid-40s. So who knows how preparation will go, whether I'll be any chance of going a long way under that. But, yeah, I've set myself the goal of I just want to try and prepare as well as I can, and a PB would be great. And if I can go a long way under that, then that's even better.
That's exciting. I think everyone's pretty much running a Osaka Marathon.
Yes.
No one's staying home.
Yeah.
Are you
racing?
I'm racing. Moose is racing. I'm trying to think who else is racing. I've just said everyone, but now I'm just listed 2 people. But
one of the guys I coach and a few others from Run Crew applied as well. So we'll hopefully be finding out soon. Yeah.
Oh, did you not find out 2 weeks ago? A week ago?
Yeah, I found out.
You found out, yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're in the same boat.
Everyone know either way?
I think so. I think it was a very general population ballot, and then because I was asking Moose when now do they ask you what your PB is and which start line and stuff you're on. So he said that comes a bit later when the website gets updated and stuff. Hey Benny, one of the things I asked Dave and Andy, one of the first questions was to give your mental health a score out of 10 at the moment. What are you rolling with?
Give myself a 7.
Okay, that's good. I was going to say no 7s. Because,
is that the easy answer?
Well, a 7's if you take out the 7, 6, it's there's some questions about 6, and it's 8, it's 8, you're fine. The other 2 boys went 8, but yeah, tell me why a 7.
I think normally I operate around an 8 or a 9. I'm generally a pretty happy, positive person, and, the occasional score of 6, I guess, and lower when things go on. But 7, why have I knocked myself 1 off? I think just with being a coach, you have good days and bad days, and being a full-time coach, I coach quite a lot of people, and earlier today I was just helping a couple of my athletes through tough periods, whether that be injury, illness, or just some of those tougher conversations you have to have with your athletes. You ride the highs with them, but you also ride the lows with them as well, and I think I sort of empathise and carry some of that load myself when the athletes are either injured or sick, or going through a really rough patch where we're trying to figure out what's wrong, and probably shoulder a bit of responsibility with that, so you feel a little bit responsible for whether it's an injury or a slump in form, and so that probably drags my own mental health down a little bit, but I think I mentioned off air that I'll be heading out to a meet tonight and hopefully get some big PBs and positive performances, and then that lifts me up to a 9 and a 10 out of 10 when I go through those moments as a coach as well. So 7's still good, but just probably had some tough conversations today that put me on edge a little bit.
What do you do to not wear that baggage? What have you got in place as a coach to because it's got to be hard. You're having conversations. There's always people injured and stuff in running. What kind of things do you put in place to not wear it too much that then it affects your mental health?
Yeah, I think probably just putting good, good communication is key. So making sure there's an open line of communication with people, and then putting plans in place. So like I said, with my own running and my own mental health, it's controlling the controllables and trying not to let what you can't control affect you too much. And so I guess that relates to coaching as well. So if I can give the best advice I can and put the best plan in place, I've really sort of done all that I can. And if it still goes awry, you try not to wear too much of that responsibility or feel guilt or anything associated with that. It's just sometimes these things happen, and that's probably key for me.
Yeah, and when you're planning that would obviously, I can imagine you're a super prepared guy that you're planning to not have any issues. They still always arise, but I could maybe imagine that you'd be pretty thoroughly planned, so you're kind of avoiding stuff that can potentially come up.
I try to be, could always do better, and That's the thing though with high performance running, is that I could coach people and they would have zero injury risk, but they also would never get close to their potential in terms of how high they, what they want to achieve. And so it's finding that balance between pushing in pursuit of excellence, but also holding back enough to allow for sustainable training. And sometimes it's hard to know exactly where that line is as a coach and as an athlete. Like, we all get ourselves injured from time to time. So yeah, that's probably a challenge that we all face as athletes and coaches.
Yep. How did your mindset change when you become a dad?
Oh, look, that definitely helps put things into perspective. I'm sure you felt the same. It's like, yeah, you can be having a tough day, and then when I walk through the front door, or I look over at my daughter and she's just, huge smile on her face. It really helps. Put things into perspective for sure.
Yeah, but I found it was hard. Bringing up a human, like, it's such a shock. Like, you cannot prepare for it. We went out for lunch with some friends who are like 33 weeks pregnant on Saturday, and you're trying to kind of explain to them like how much your life changes. And I'm sure people tried to do it to us as well when we were expecting. But it's just, yes, that's amazing, like seeing life, but it's the whole, like you're talking about stress of coaching people, like stress of having a human that you've got to look after. I know for me, it was just like, wow, this is like just flipped our lives upside down, and a huge, huge challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's no true off switch. Like, you can't say, all right, that's been a really tough weekend, I'm going to go home and I'm just going to lay on the couch and binge watch a TV show for a couple of hours, or watch a movie, or just completely switch off from the world, because you just can't do that anymore when you're looking after a little human. And so that's been probably one area where I've definitely gotten sick a lot more since having Goldie, and I think some of that might just be due to like a little less recovery time and downtime.
Sleep time.
Outweigh the negatives, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. Would this year be the I was thinking about this the other day, like 2023, you can kind of tick off all the things you've done, but I also think it's been the year where I've had the less amount of sleep. Would you be the same?
Yeah.
Which can obviously impact running performance, and I feel like it can bring up everything else gets a bit stressful. Like, the running gets a bit harder, work gets a bit more stressful, kind of writing back to emails gets harder to do, all those kind of the coaching stuff you're kind of talking about. And that's for me when it's just like, all right, I can feel like that 8 might be dropping to a 7, which is dropping to a 6, until you can kind of get your head above water sometimes to be able to like cope with it.
Yeah, definitely. I can't remember who used this analogy first, but those people who spin plates.
Oh yeah.
And like, one plate might be your family, and another plate is your coaching, and another plate is your own running and housework, things like that. And like the plate that you spend so much time spinning at the moment for me is being a father and family. So you're constantly having to go back and spin that plate a little bit more, and the more time you spend spinning that one, some of the other plates start to wobble a bit as if they're going to fall off. And I think it's important just to, I guess, have good time management and make sure you're spending a bit of time at each one of those plates, just giving it another nudge and make sure they're not toppling over.
Yeah, that's a good one. Have you ever had to drop a plate for the sake of like making sure you can spin the others? And it doesn't have to be like recently, but anything you can think back to when you're like, okay, this ain't good for me, I've taken on too much, got to start smashing a plate.
I don't think I've ever smashed one, but definitely I think because I'm quite flexible with my own training, that's a plate that I can, that can do without spinning from time to time. And I try to prioritise family and my own coaching, and I just know that plate will sort of balance pretty well. And then if I need to come home and do a late run on a treadmill, or miss out on a training with the group, and then just do my own session afterwards, things like that, I can always do that. So I think having that flexibility is good, but I haven't smashed any plates yet, so hopefully we don't need to.
Yeah, okay. Do you ever feel like you need more, like, be more selfish though? Like everything else you do seems to be for other people in your family and your athletes, and going to different training sessions, and you're talking about driving to Bankstown tonight. Like, do you ever get to a stage where it frustrates you that you don't have enough time for you and your own running?
Sometimes, but I get so much out of all of those other areas that yeah. But yeah, like I wish there were some more hours in some days for sure.
Yeah. Take me back to the Ben St. Lawrence as like the Olympian, some big high performance stuff. Like, I think I've seen you before a couple of races and you seem very relaxed and chilled out. Has it always been that way?
Yeah, I've always, no, actually as a kid, as a junior, I got so nervous that I would throw up before races.
Really?
Yeah, like I would get really anxious and so nervous. I'm not sure when that shifted. Maybe when I had some time off running, and then by the time I came back, I was just more mature. And I do remember my first ever international race. I made one of the Chiba Ekiden relays pretty early in my comeback, and I sort of felt like I was way out of my depth there. And I remember getting so nervous for that race. But I think just over time developed a bit of a thick skin when it came to racing, and was pretty much able to get the best out of myself on race day. So just sort of never let nerves get to me too much. I tried to embrace the energy and use the occasion to lift myself up a little bit. So yeah, never got overly nervous. Obviously pretty nervous when you get to an Olympics and that sort of thing. You are shitting yourself a little bit in the ballroom, surrounded by all these absolute superstars. And yeah, it would be easy to get overwhelmed, but I think I managed not to.
What strategy did you put in place though? Like, were you just like, putting it into perspective, or breath work, or like, tell us about like you're sitting in there, Galen Rupp, Mo Farah, all the Kenyans, the Ethiopians. Like, how do you keep calm?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that most of the work's already done. So other than just going out and running 25 laps as fast as you can, executing fairly well, there's not much else to worry about really. So I actually, I used to love getting to the start line and just knowing that, all right, all the work's done, all the planning, all the thinking is done, and now we just get to go out and race. And so I think I used to be able to channel that into some positive energy, and I would have some mantras or like goals that I had within the race, and I was just looking forward to getting out there and running. I think it's almost a relief once the gun goes off.
So almost like dumb it down, just like the hard stuff's done. This is just the execution part.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a complicated sport, is it, when you think about it?
Not at all.
What about when you get that voice in your head that like the pace is picked up and you're not sure if you can hang on, or those kind of negative thoughts that you sometimes get in a race, especially the track stuff when you're just going around and around? What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, I often did, like before I knew that it was called breath work, I did focus on my breathing. So I would have a breathing to step rhythm. So if I was going harder, to be 2 steps for a breath in, 1 step for a breath out. And if I found myself getting right up to the red line where you're almost panicking and blowing up and your heart's beating through your mouth, I would really focus on my steps and my breathing. Even if that just got me through 100 metres, 200 metres, it just helped to settle things, probably brought my heart rate down a little bit, and just was able to find that rhythm. When you're right up against that red line, if you can just hold yourself back from it without crossing over it, you can sort of, save a blow up.
And the mantras, can you remember what ones you went with?
Just things like fast rhythm or tap, 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 like just thinking that just keep tapping the feet as light as you can and keep moving forward. Forward momentum was another one. When I was getting close to my limit in a race, I would often arch the back a bit too much and sort of sit down into my stride. So I would try to forward momentum would just tell me to sort of hold my form together and maybe get a slight forward lean and just keep driving forward. Look, sometimes there's nothing you can do. It's just survival mode, and you're just absolutely smashing yourself out. And those are tough when it's a 10K race and you're blowing up when you're seeing 13 laps to go. That's a tough day.
There would have been races that would be a blur mentally as well, thinking back at them. Like, what was that big one? You come second at Melbourne, didn't you? It was it Old Zatopek? Old Olympic Park. Big kick finish. You rolled, I reckon, Collis and maybe a couple of Americans were there. What was that race?
Was this a 5K?
5K, yeah.
That was Melbourne Track Classic 2000.
Was Legat there? No.
Yeah, Legat.
He won. Yeah. So, like, thinking back to that, can you remember that race, or is it all just a blur because you're just, like, putting these manches through, just run as fast as you can?
No, I can remember it pretty clearly. I think the world champs standard at the time was 13:20 maybe, or 21. And so the goal for that race was just to run finish as highly as I could, but also try to run that world champs A standard for the Daegu world champs. But I also knew that I was in phenomenal shape, and I knew that it was a rare occasion to have a strong field like that, who have all had to travel from the other side of the world to come and race us. Normally it's the other way around. And I really wanted to... I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder because I was still working full-time, holding down a job in Sydney and, paying my way pretty much everywhere. And I knew these professionals were coming down, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to show you guys. So early on in the race, I was just being as smooth as possible and just sitting in. I didn't have to lead at all and just getting dragged around. But then as we got closer and closer to the finish, there were less and less of us still involved in the race. And with 500 to go, I was just getting ready to make a move. I was sitting on Matt Tegenkamp.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He was sitting behind Solinsky was leading, then it was Legat, and then Tegenkamp, I think, and I was in fourth, coming into 500 to go. And I felt like some separation was about to happen between the top two and Tegenkamp. And so I just went to go around, and it was just as we were hitting some lapped runners, and I think I had to go out into lane 3 from memory. And so I sort of stalled and just hesitated a little bit, and it allowed Solinsky and Legat to get maybe 5 meters. And I was like, oh, that's all right. I'm still gonna get the standard here. You just got to kick as hard as you can. And as I started kicking, I actually caught back up to those two, and I caught them maybe halfway down the back straight. And Solinsky was still leading, and I just thought, oh, fuck it, I'm going to go around both of them and try and win.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was storming down the back straight, and like at that point, I was moving faster than they were. I thought, oh shit, I'm going to win this. But just as I got up to their shoulder, I think Legat sensed that I was there, and so he went around Solinsky as well. And then I latched on to Bernard, and I think round from about 200 to go until 90 metres to go, I still thought I was a shot because he hadn't managed to drop me at all. I was still on his shoulder, but then someone threw a fridge at me in the home straight. I think he ran 13.08 and I ran 13.10, and then Solinsky was coming back at me down the straight, but I managed to hold him off and, ran 13.10, so that was a 15-second PB. But that was one of those races where it all just, other than I didn't quite win it, but it's one of those races where when I wanted my legs to work, they did. And, I was able to, get my second Australian 5K title that night, and, beat a few pretty well-credentialed runners. There were, I think, 5 or 6 sub-13-minute guys in that race.
13.10 in Australia, in old spikes. We were just talking on the show last night. The qualifier's 13.05. Like, there wouldn't be too many Australians who are run quicker than 13.10 on Australian soil. Obviously, Mottram at the Com Games.
Yeah, I think it's just Mottram and then myself. I was the second fastest Australian on Australian soil.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
I think that was pretty surreal because Mottram was a guy I really looked up to as I was coming into the sport, and then he was in that race that night, so it was kind of cool to, I know it wasn't the same level of Craig Mottram that was running at the Games, but it was still pretty cool.
Claim that, mate, I reckon. Yeah, I remember watching it. It was just amazing, like kick finish. The mental health would have been pretty good that night, I could imagine. You would have been 10 out of 10. That's the kind of feelings I reckon you could... Well, from the outside looking in, I'm assuming it was. Like, if you want to bottle that feeling, does it?
Yeah, it does get better than that in terms of... it was a real breakthrough, probably ran better than anyone expected that I would. My parents had flown down to watch from Sydney, and like my coach and manager and everyone were there. So it was a really cool night. But the problem with a night that goes so well is that you then raise your expectations, and so does everybody else, and so then it's impossible to have another night like that, pretty much. So I just, based on that, I thought, oh, look, my PB is going to be under 13 minutes before too long, and yeah, probably it took me another 2 years to run 13:10 again. So that was the highlight there. I had some other good races in 2011, but then went through a rough patch and things got a lot harder. And yeah, so those highs are amazing, but then it's pretty hard to sustain that level of competition.
Two-part question. The first part, like, what do you put into place when you're going through a slump or like an injury or whatever to look after your mental health? And then the second part is like, did you do anything to block out that outside noise of like people talking about your performances and stuff if they weren't so good or not living up to expectations?
So the first part was, I feel like I keep going back to this, and maybe this was just my go-to, was, if I was injured or if I was going through a slump, it was really just bring it back to basics. So if I was injured, rather than getting up each day and just being angry that I was injured, it was like, well, what can I do today to get me one step closer to not being injured or to getting back to levels of performance like I had that night in Melbourne. So whether that would be, if I was on a cross-training plan, it was like, all right, let's go and attack this cross-training, tick that off, and then focus on something else for today, rather than just sort of spending the whole day, being angry that I was injured. So I think having a good plan of action, ticking it off, and then moving on and trying to have something else. And so I think I was lucky that for most of my running career, I also worked, and I, got into coaching quite a long time ago as well. So I had other things that I could focus on. And what was the second part? Oh, how to block out.
Yeah, like other people's expectations, or like, I guess the media side of thing wouldn't have been huge with athletics and stuff and social media and stuff, but even just like with Sydney the other week, people, you're thinking like you let people down, or there's going to be people talking about your performances and stuff.
Yeah, that never really got to me too much, and maybe it's because social media wasn't a huge thing back then. I didn't mind like a little bit of negativity. I found I could, if I heard that someone had been talking shit or whatever, it was actually a bit of motivation for me. I'll prove you wrong kind of thing. So I was able to turn that into a bit of motivation. But yeah, I've never been overly concerned about what other people said about me. I figured that if they were talking shit about me, it was probably because they didn't understand me or my situation. And if they met me, we'd probably get on pretty well, and vice versa. So yeah, I never stressed too much about what other people think.
Geez, you're a rounded guy. You just seem so relaxed. You just got this all figured out, Benny. I reckon we put that 7 up to a 9 with some of these responses. Hey, do you talk to people regularly about your mental health? Like, we often compare splits or Ks per week and how you kind of tracking physically, but do you often talk to people about how you're going mentally?
Not a lot. It's one thing that I could definitely do a bit better. I'm good at giving advice and being someone that others can talk to, but I probably could definitely open up a little bit more myself. So I definitely do, and I've got some people close to me that I can talk to. But yeah, I'm also I don't know. I like to be quite stoic, I guess, and not feel like I'm burdening other people with my problems. And I know I wouldn't be. And I know that, this series of talks you're doing is to do with Movember and opening up lines of conversation, particularly amongst men. So I should practice what I preach and definitely talk a little bit more about that sort of thing to people close to me. So yeah, that's something I could definitely do better at.
Yeah, but it sounds like you've got so many good strategies in place anyway that it's kind of like you're almost letting it speak through your actions, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is, an interesting one. What about like that? Have you ever used like a sports psych and stuff? When you would have made that many teams, like were they available to you and like talking about like the visualization or strategies you can use in races and stuff like that?
I never worked with one. and that's probably something I would do differently if I went back to that level of competition again. I would probably make use of a sports psychologist. Some of the athletes I coach now work with sports psychologists, and it seems to help a lot. But it's not something I ever did. And that's not because I didn't think it'd be worthwhile. It was just, I feel like, I don't know, it's something that you've only got, like when you're working and running and, there's only so much time for everything. And I think that was probably something I put down the list of priorities. Like it was something I always wanted to do, but just never got around to doing.
Yeah. Was there a stigma around it as well, you think?
I don't know. I don't feel like there was. I didn't, like, that's not why I didn't feel the reason why I shouldn't. It's just that.
I get your reason. As someone who pays for a gym membership that doesn't go to the gym very often, I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting though, because so the two university degrees I did, one was human movement, so like exercise science, and the other one was social science psychology. And I did those because I thought that one day I would like to get into sports psychology. So I went from wanting to do it as a career to not even using when I was an athlete. So it was interesting.
But do you think you've got some of those skills that you'd get from a sports psychologist and you're kind of using them as you're going?
That's what I thought, yeah. And there was probably some truth to that. But, just like people
even if there's not, it sounds good.
Yeah, but people who study strength training still benefit from having their own strength coach. Like, yeah.
Hey, what does your mind do? Tell me about how you feel off different types of runs. So, like, do you get a kick mentally out of a long run compared to like an easy jog or some hill reps or a track workout or a threshold, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, I come off the track and I feel like I can walk through a wall and I'm happy to fight anyone kind of thing, even though I'd get the shit battered out of me. But like, I'm interested to hear what other people's brains do after different types of runs.
Yeah, that's funny. So like hard sessions where you're just absolutely going to the well and you come off it with just endorphins buzzing. Yeah, that's like being high, that's a good feeling. And if you could bottle that, you'd make a lot of money. So coming off those sessions, I want to take on the world. I want to, if I went and did a good track session tomorrow, I'd be like, all right, bring it on. I'm going to go and break Jack Rayner's 10K Australian record. I'm going to get that back. Like I'd be fired up in that way. But then, this morning I went out for a 90-minute run on the trails here near my house in the Blue Mountains and took the 3 dogs for the first half of that run and went down, alongside a river through a rainforest. And so that for me is like meditation. As long as the dogs are behaving themselves, that's like a very different mindset. I come off that just, relaxed and had some time in nature and some time with my dogs, which are great for my mental health. So that's a very different, it's still training, but to me that's also recreation, and I come off that just feeling relaxed. Long runs, I think finishing that, because that was always, the Sunday, it was one of the toughest sessions of the week. I think it was a sense of achievement and relief almost at ticking another week off. And when I was training very hard from Sunday morning until Tuesday evening, which was my next hard session, even though I would do 2 runs in a gym session on Monday, it felt like my weekend started then, because I didn't have to train really hard from Sunday morning all the way through till Tuesday evening. So that was a sense of relief, I guess, and satisfaction having completed it.
Just on that, and sorry to interrupt, but are you the kind of guy as well that when you check your Strava Monday morning and there's nothing there, it's just like, oh, I must be a bit unfit. No, because sometimes I'm like that. You just bang out 160k a week. You get that sense of accomplishment, and then you wake up Monday and you look and you're like, we're on 0. We're starting again. Like, we've got to rebuild.
No, I don't feel like I understand where you're from there, but I sort of just think of it more as layering or building a wall or a pyramid, and it's like that brick's already in the wall and now we're going to put another one on top of that.
We're back to square one to building this next brick.
Yeah, so I've never been too worried about weekly mileage and things like that. I often, over the years, have kept handwritten training diaries. I've used Strava like religiously for little periods and then gone off it for other periods. So, I think that hasn't affected me too much. But I did notice, I think there was a time where I probably subconsciously was letting the GPS detract from how much I was enjoying some of my runs. So I did go, and I just use a stopwatch now for most of my easy miles up here in the mountains, and I just run for effort and duration. So I couldn't tell you how far I ran in my 90 minutes this morning, but I enjoyed it so much more than if I would have had the GPS going and knowing exactly what pace I was going and how far I was running.
That's right, because you wrote that post about it. Was that during COVID? Yeah, it was very well received. I remember that.
Yeah, I found that to be really helpful for me at the point I was at in my running career. And particularly, I think living where I do, we've got these amazing trails around us, but they're quite rough and they're single trail and they're windy. And so you don't run very fast on them. And so if I was to have my GPS running, it would still kind of irritate me that I might see some 6-minute Ks in there, even though the effort's the same as a 4-minute 30K on the flat. That might start to get to me a little bit, or it might mean that as I get to an intersection on that run, down to the left is a much nicer place to run. I'm going to go alongside the river, I'm going to go through the rainforest, but it's going to be slower, or a more boring run to the right, but it's going to look more impressive on Strava. Now that I'm just going by stopwatch and effort, I'll run in a much nicer area and not give a shit how slow it is. Whereas knowing that other people are going to see the run, even if I didn't feel like I was bothered by it, I might choose the right-hand path and run a bit faster. And yeah, so I think that allowed me to just not put any pressure on those easy runs. And I think we've only got so much mental energy to put into our sessions, our runs. So if you're not wasting any of that on your easy days and your general mileage and your doubles, you've got a lot more of that to put into the sessions where you know you really should be performance focused.
Yeah, or just our lives as well. Like energy's got to go everywhere. I was talking to someone the other day who didn't like doing out and backs because they were worried about their Strava art loops not looking good. And I was like, you were wasting too much energy on that stuff. Like, give me an out and back. I actually enjoy out and backs because I only have to think for half of it. And I'm just like, this is an easy 70 minutes. I'm going to run in one direction, or run somewhere for 35 minutes and turn around, because then I feel like my mind can go to other places because I don't have to think about where I'm running anymore.
Yeah.
And back to, I love the bit about the stopwatch. Like, I'm a huge believer in that. Like, I still wear GPS and upload everything, but I just have on my easy days just a stopwatch face showing. And if it's 4:15s or 4:45s at the end of it, that's what it is. And just don't have any of that data showing.
I just noticed as well, like with some of the people I coached who were really trying to squeeze the highest number of miles out of their week, or wanted to look like they were going, fast and get more kudos, they were starting to avoid hills and rougher terrain, some of the things that have been, cornerstones of the best runners that our country's ever produced. So they were trying to, get maximum miles. So you might get, 20K out of a 90-minute run on the flat as opposed to 18K over hills. And so they would choose the flat run, whereas the 18K over hills would have been far more beneficial. So I think, striving for maximum mileage at the expense of running over hills was one of the elements that led to me writing that post during lockdown, in addition to how much joy I was getting out of getting off GPS.
Yeah. Do you have rules around like social media and stuff as well, where you don't check it or don't let it affect that whole like comparing to each other's life kind of thing? I feel like it's just a massive highlight reel and it can be not great.
Yeah. Once again, I've never been too bad at that, but one thing that I've noticed recently is I use a whole different number of ways to communicate with my athletes. Some of them prefer Messenger, some like Instagram messages, some are WhatsApp, but I've found myself, like, I'll be writing a program and I'll think, okay, I've messaged this person, I better go see what we said and then apply that to the program. And so I'll open up Instagram, for example, to check messages to see what we've said. And then 5 minutes later, I find myself scrolling, like seeing some people arguing in the comments on something. It's like, up here, like, why?
What am I doing here?
What I'm trying to do is move all of my coaching communication to WhatsApp and email so that I can delete social media off my phone completely and only use it, on the iPad if I need to promote something for the business or, share some photos for family, that sort of thing. So, yeah, the comparison isn't too bad, but it's so easy to just get distracted. I'm not on TikTok for that reason. But I know
we're way too old for TikTok, aren't we?
Yeah. But I know some of my athletes will go down, rabbit holes on TikTok and waste hours of their day. So,
yeah, Yeah, it can't be. I feel for the kids these days.
Yeah.
There's so many different directions pulling their attention.
Yeah.
Last one for you, Benny, or two more. Do you use any like resources and stuff? Like it just sounds like in this conversation, you haven't listed anything that you're being like, I do this, and this for my mental health. But things like being outside, being with the dogs, prioritising family, being organised, like all this put together, not comparing yourself, not giving a shit about Strava splits, all that kind of stuff wrapped up together is why you got a handle on this stuff. But do you use any kind of resources to make sure that you're like, do you meditate or have an app or anything like that the listeners can be like, oh, I can maybe pursue that? Listen to any podcasts that talk about this stuff?
No, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but none that talk about this sort of stuff. But look, if I need cheering up, I'll listen to a comedy podcast, to almost distract me from, whatever's getting me down. So I've downloaded some meditation apps and things like that, and I've used them once or twice, and it's something that I'd like to explore some more. But I genuinely think that my meditation is either running or walking with the dogs or going out for a hike. I feel like I'm reading a book at the moment. I was gifted The Daily Stoic. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, it's from the same Ryan Holiday.
Yeah. So
have you read his other one? Ego is the Enemy?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. He's got a lot of books, but I've just read that one. Yeah. What's the Stoic one like?
Well, I've only just started it, so
that was my next question. My final question: what book are you reading at the moment?
Yeah. I'm actually, I'm reading that. I've probably got about 3 books on the go, but I've got a whole, probably not quite rivaling Moose's running book collection, but I've got some classic running books, and so I'm rereading the Arthur Lydiard program, like his book. It's an old school book that I found at a I think I told you this once before. I get some of my books from charity stores, and so I managed to find this Arthur Lydiard book at a charity store, which was pretty cool. So yeah, Daily Stoic, the Arthur Lydiard book, and I was just reading the De Castella On Running book from the 80s as well. And
oh yeah, I'm looking at my bookshelf now as we're talking. So the Arthur Lydiard one, is that the Run to the Top?
Yeah, that's the one.
Because you get them sometimes with no covers on them, don't you?
Yeah.
They just rip the covers off and sell them.
And I had read it before, but it's funny, if it's been a decade between reading it, you've read so much else in between that when you read it again, it means a little bit more to you.
Do you find, because this is something I was talking to someone about the other day, if I'm in a shit mood and if I feel like I'm too stressed or too busy or whatever it is, that corresponds with how much I'm also reading. So like if I don't have enough time if I'm reading 10 pages a week or 100 pages a week, if I'm reading 100 pages a week, I'm a much happier guy, got shit all covered in my life. Like I feel like my head's above water, I'm cruising, this is all good. Whereas if I don't have time to read, I'm way too stressed, there's too much going on, I've committed to too many things, and I've got to almost cut some stuff out because that's a great, I reckon I could say to Carly now, just check where my bookmark is, and that's what kind of mood I'm going to be in over the next week.
So do you think what's the cause and effect there? Is it you get too busy so you're not reading, and so that
lack energy?
Too busy that's created the tension, or is it that you've stopped reading and that you're not getting that downtime because you've chosen to stop reading? Is it a time and energy thing? Yeah,
that's definitely time and energy. Like you want to get in bed, and instead of having half an hour, you're falling asleep after 2 pages. And it feels like you just, and even that sense of achievement too, it's just then I kind of get down in the dumps that I'm only reading 2 pages a night. Not down the dumps, but it's just that, what we're talking about Strava before, your weekly mileage, ticking that kind of off, you're not getting, it's like another aspect of your life where you feel like you're not achieving. And it's because it's I might have had a shocker night with the kids or whatever, so we've got up at all hours, and then, you're too tired when you get into bed to read, or, teeing up a podcast at night. I always find it hard if you're doing a 7:30 or an 8 p.m. recording kind of thing, so then you're not jumping in bed till 9:30, so you're just jumping straight to sleep. So I think sleep and my reading rate would definitely impact my mental health massively.
Yeah, I think when I've said yes to too many things, that's when I'm probably at my worst in terms of mental health when I've just got, like, if I've said yes to and things that create anxiety for me, like public speaking or anything on camera, or things that push me a long way out of my comfort zone. Like, I'm a big believer in getting out of your comfort zone and saying yes to things and trying, for me, even things like this. Like, I a long time ago was too afraid to get up and talk in front of 5 people, but I've sort of pushed myself.
Really, you do it so well though.
Yeah, but I did some commentating for the Sydney Marathon, not the one that just went, but the year before, and I was doing some live crosses out on course, and like that was one of the toughest weekends I've had in a long time, just because I got so nervous for it, and I just felt so angry at my former self, like, why did I ever say yes to this? This is way too far out of my comfort zone. But then you do it, and straight away you're like, I'm so glad I said yes to this. Yeah. But it's almost like, that anxiety I feel, and if I say yes to a few of those things all at once, it takes so much energy out of me that then I start going back to the spinning plate analogy. It's like all those other plates, because you've said yes to all this other stuff, it doesn't mean that you can just pause all of those other plates. So then I go and put all of that energy into some of these other projects, and then you come back and you got to put that extra time back into those other plates.
Just on that, like the live cross stuff, like, was that you had to wing it off the top of your head, or were they like, we need you to mention this, this and this, plus you've got to wing this 25-second interview with this person?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. So we would, like, I would go to different points around the course. We were riding these cool electric scooters around the course, and then they would say, all right, we want you to sort of start there, walk across there, and maybe talk about the weather, and then say, we've got the leaders coming through, blah, 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 and you've just got one take to do it. And it gives you a lot of respect for people who are good at that kind of thing, because, I think I scraped by, but, they didn't invite me back to follow.
Eloise Wellings does it now, doesn't she? She was doing it this year? No, it's only because you were racing. That's why you didn't get invited back.
Yeah.
And you were pacing as well. One of the Sydney marathons I watched, you were trying to do the pace job and no one was going with you.
Yeah, I've paced it a couple of times. So I've had a good relationship with Sydney Marathon and Lardy over the years.
Yeah, must be huge. Like, they must have been stoked with that. Like, you'd have some inside word about how happy they were, and being a Sydney guy, they're gonna tick that box for sure, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they're happy with how much progress they made from the previous year and how well they're tracking for the candidacy program, but also got some exciting plans for how they're going to improve it again for next year and moving forward as well. So, it's going to be cool to watch.
Last one, nothing to do with mental health, or maybe it is. What are you thinking about the state of athletics, road racing at the moment? We've seen 2 marathon world records go down recently. The expensive Adidas shoes. We're talking last night about, point systems and trying to get people qualified for the marathons, and seeing Zatopek, Valencia, Fukuoka, like this mega weekend coming up in 2.5 weeks. Like, you take it all in and like get excited, or you just sit back and observe and just worry about you?
No, I get excited. I watch, I consume a lot of athletics and track, like marathon, road marathons, like Zatopek, man, that sounds like it's going to be an awesome night. I wish that we'd had, like, that I was still sort of in good 10K track shape and could go down and race that. So that's going to be an exciting night. I'm probably not going to be there in person, but I'll be tuning into the live stream. The marathon world records, like, I appreciate them, but also, like anyone who sees crazy performances like that, I have a little bit of trepidation as to how they're running that fast, but I'm still able to suspend my disbelief and enjoy the performances. I think, like, distance running and track and field in Australia is on fire at the moment, and it's really exciting to be involved as a fan, but also as a coach, as we build towards a home Olympics in Brisbane. I was at World Cross in Bathurst. I lived in Bathurst, so to see World Cross come to my university hometown was awesome. So, no, I'm excited by the current state of distance running and athletics. I went to the World Champs in Oregon. Was that last year?
Yeah, so, it was really hot, wasn't it?
Trackside for 10 days of World Champs with my wife, Katie, and her family, who are American. They live over in the USA. So we're going to be at the US trials next year for a family holiday, watching the US trials for the Olympics. So, yeah, I love living out here in the mountains and disconnecting from the outside world often, but also very connected and consume a whole lot of running.
Yeah, that go in and out mentality, that would be nice as well. I get that a bit living in a country town. Like, you get the most of, being relaxed, and then you can just drive into a race and have that stress of traffic and the big city, and then you get to go home.
Yeah, there's a certain point driving back up the mountains where I feel like I've crossed the threshold and I'm deeper. And we're very lucky to live out here and still be able to be connected to Sydney and to drive in and coach there, and do a lot of my work from this office here. I look out over the bush and the backyard and the chooks and the swimming pool, and very, very grateful.
Yeah. This is the actual last one, because I've said the last one about 3 times, but have you got a tip for Zatopek? I saw that Pat Tiernan is coming home today, which I thought was big news. Do you know anything about anyone racing? Any juniors? Anyone from your stable to keep an eye out for the listeners?
Look, it'd be hard to go past Pat Tiernan.
Jack Rayner, not giving him a chance?
Jack's phenomenal, the Australian record holder. He's been on fire on the roads. But, Pat Tiernan, I think the shape he must have been in to get to 1 lap to go in the race where he, crawled to the finish line, but I feel like he must have been in 26:50 sort of shape to be able to be in that race with 1 lap to go. So if he's anywhere near that at the moment, it'll be exciting. And he ran a good half marathon, so yeah.
I like that. I was very excited when I saw that pop up today. Awesome, Benny. Thanks so much for your time. 55 minutes goes pretty quick when you're talking to you. Appreciate that you were willing to come on for this kind of conversation. Could have easily said no. And once again, thanks for giving us some time for the Inside Running podcast.
No worries. Thanks, Brady. And keep up the good work, mate.
Thank you.